At this stage, the White House isn't quite sure just yet, but Tony won't let that get in the way of him standing in front of a jet fighter or looking serious next to a batch of delicious soldiers. And what a villain we have in the Islamic State. Now, don't get me wrong, those guys scare the absolute fertilizer out of me. But that's the point, isn't it? What distresses me the most is that the leaders of the Muslim community in this country refuse to take time out of their busy schedules denouncing fundamentalist violence to denounce this fundamentalist violence. It's almost as if they think they're on Team Un-Australia. Well, here's a fun fact. Since President Barack Obama announced that the US would take military action in the Middle East, airstrikes against Islamic State militants, the share prices of Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Raytheon and L3 Communications have all outperformed the market and are all up between 6 and 8%. Those are some of the biggest defence companies in the world. And isn't war good for business? But of course, that's how it goes, doesn't it? We buy loads of exciting weapons to fight all these terrorists, and then we head off to blow them up and also to blow up their friends and relations and their children and their children's friends and relations and the people who live downstairs from them and the bloke at the shops. And, well, then what happens? Everyone who only got partly blown up or who survived after their family got completely blown up is very angry, which is not unreasonable. I mean, imagine how you'd feel if you had a bomb dropped on your pergola because you lived next door to a Hells Angels mum. And anyway, what happens then is that some of these people take up arms, and can you blame them? Well, of course you can, but it doesn't stop them. And now the trouble is we used up all the bombs blowing up the last lot of terrorists. Now there's a whole bunch of new terrorists. Help! What are we going to do? We'll have to make a bunch more weapons, and governments will buy them, and round we go again. It's the perpetual terror machine. And of course, that means Prime Minister Tony can spend his time running about the landscape with his undies on his head, claiming that the jihadists are coming, so George Brandis needs to see who you're Snapchatting pictures of your enormous... Two. This war's not about freedom, it's about polling. An obvious distraction from the domestic disaster that is embattled Treasurer Joe Hockey. He can't get one foot out fast enough to get the next one in. If only we could harness the raw energy of his gaffes. We could power Murwillumbah for the next 200 years. And he's not the only one. It's not a government, it's a clown car. But I'm sure the good people of Iraq or Iran or wherever it is will be over the moon to hear we're coming to bomb their country again, or should I say, delivering ordnance onto the ground from our aircraft. It's for their own good. Till next time, thanks for listening, Patriots. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living, proudly brought to you by the First Dog on the Moon Institute.
Well, there you go. There I was driving along when suddenly I heard that First Dog on the Moon was about to be replayed on Tuesday, not Wednesday, as my forgettery had assigned it in my consciousness. So I had to pull off the road and just grab what I could. It began with, I think he said, "Hello Australians, we're going to war again. Hooray!" That was the only bit you missed. I gotta say, YouTubers, subscribers and viewers, I reckon Tony Abbott and George Brandis and Cameron, the Pommy Prime Muppet, I reckon they've got it all backwards. At the moment, they're having a hysterical fit and they're basically smashing holes in the Western capitalist, democratic, free world way of life, because they say they're terribly afraid that people are going to go overseas, fight with the Islamic extremists, and then come back to Australia or to England or to America, all radicalised. And therefore they're going to stir up homegrown plots when they get back, or they're going to recruit people and talk them into going overseas. But there's not a lot of evidence for that. The figures at the moment for the Australian Jet Set Jihad group is that 150 people from Australia have gone over there to be helpful to various Islamic extremist groups in Libya and Iraq and Syria and wherever. Out of those 150, 60 of them have taken to the field of battle and 15 are dead. So you've got a 25% kill rate, an elimination rate, a termination rate in just letting the extremists who want to take up arms overseas, let them go. 25% of them will turn up dead over there. And let's face it, if you want to grow up in the suburbs of Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane or Perth or something and decide, Adelaide perhaps, decide that in order to be a fully fledged human being, you have to go overseas and fight for the caliphate, you're probably going to stay there once you get there, because you're going to like it living among a bunch of people who think it's okay to behead people, to amputate hands for thievery, stone people to death for adultery. If you like those ideals, you'll be happy there and you won't come back here. So, okay, by allowing people to go overseas and fight in such half-assed, penny-ante, ragtag militias, we get them out of here so they can't go fizz-bang pop here. The other thing is, the caliphate is running on captured equipment. It's all right to say, oh yes, they've got all these air bases full of American helicopters and they've got pilots who can fly them and they've got engineers who can service them, but they haven't got any fucking spare parts. They haven't got any technical backup. Right? So give them a month in the desert campaigning and all their Humvees will be stopped. All their helicopters will be grounded. Their jet fighters won't go either. The artillery will have fired off its ammunition and that'll be it. Unless, of course, they can capture some lovely new Russian weapons from the Kurds. Weapons that the Obama government is presumably purchasing from the Israelis who captured it from the Egyptians and the Jordanians and the Syrians back in 1973. That is, after all, where the Americans got all of the Russian manufactured weapons which they supplied to the Taliban when the Taliban was fighting with American support against the Russians. Yep, you buy it off the Israelis because they captured it from the Egyptians, or you can buy it from the Egyptians because they don't fucking want the Russian stuff because they know it doesn't work against American stuff. That's why the Australian gun running operation conducted by the Royal Australian Air Force is taking Russian ammunition to the Kurds. I suppose, yeah, anyway. My point is that people who come back to their home country after running away to, join the French Foreign Legion in the Beau Geste movie, or perhaps join the Spanish Civil War and fight on the side of the International Brigade to save the world from incipient fascism, or volunteer to go to Vietnam and kill the commies for Christ to make the world safe for capitalists to sell Coca-Cola to the Buddhists. When your young wannabe heroes come back from that, they generally tend to be pacifists. They've had all the bullshit knocked out of their system. How long was it before the Vietnam veterans marched at Anzac Day? 20 fucking years. They didn't come back here and talk people into joining the army to go and play hopscotch in the minefield all over the Mekong Delta, did they? No. So what makes Tony Abbott, George Brandis, Mr. Cameron think that anybody's going to come back from playing fucking jihad in the desert and want to stir up trouble in their homeland? Not a lot of evidence for it, is there? It just doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, if you get somebody who's already feeling isolated, alienated, ostracised, left on the outside edge of any group they ever try to join because, you know, they've got strict Muslim parents or they just don't fit in the western suburbs of Sydney. If you say to them, oh no, it's all wicked, the caliphate's evil, the Muslims over there are evil, they're all terrorists, they're terrorists, they're terrorists, they're terrorists, they're terrorists. But, you know, it's not a terrible thing to sit in a cement-lined hole in the ground on an airline seat with 3 screens in front of you, fiddling with a joystick, piloting a Predator drone halfway around the world and firing Hellfire missiles into a house because some out-of-date, unreliable human intelligence indicates that an extremist terrorist supporter might be in the house. And you wind up hitting the house next door and killing all the neighbours, or killing the bloke's wife and kids because he moved out of there 6 hours ago because the human intelligence was a double agent, or was under surveillance, or your communications were tapped. Why is it only the act of a terrorist to terrorise people in the Western world with the thought that if you'll raise your kid to be a journalist who goes over to the world's conflict zones and gets kidnapped 3 fucking times, he might die. He might actually be killed by his captors and then used in a propaganda film. He certainly wasn't beheaded live on TV the way Tony Abbott likes to make it out. I can't think of a better way to influence a disaffected Islamic adolescent in Australia than to tell them they're not allowed to go and fight with the caliphate. That's how to make sure that they fester and they build up a head of steam, and then they'll do something in Australia. And it's not actually difficult to get your hands on the chemistry in order to create sudden, almost instantaneous exothermic reactions. You know, you can build yourself a better blevy. Fuel air explosives for beginners. It's not that difficult. Visit a camping shop. Look around. LP gas cylinders, candles, they're freely available. You don't need a licence. Anyway, it's about to start raining. The car's going to get noisy. So I agree with First Dog on the Moon. This is not about freedom. It's not about religion. It's not about anything but politics and polling and getting the Australian government budget off the front page. And here's the other thing. We're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the first deaths in the First World War, which were caused when the Australian amphibious expedition to West Papua went and declared war on the Lutheran missionaries. There are great celebrations planned in Australia to celebrate the fact that the Australian Army, Navy and Flying Corps went to West Papua with 2 aeroplanes, and they tried to take out the world record for the first people to bomb and strafe civilian missionaries. Sadly, the civilian missionaries surrendered before they could do any fighting. And here's the bit they're not going to tell you about in the celebrations. All the officers of the expedition were court-martialed. Being thwarted in the exercise of their military ambitions by the surrender of their potential enemies, they just looted and pillaged and committed arson and many counts of rape. Tony Abbott wants to celebrate that. He definitely wants Australia to strike a blow against the caliphate by New Year's Day 2015. The reason he wants to do it by 2015 is because that was the day last time when the Muslim caliphate attacked Australia. That's the day out at Broken Hill when the picnic train was shot up by an ice cream salesman and a halal butcher who decided that, seeing as the British Empire had declared war on the Ottoman Turkish Empire, the British Empire was at war with the Muslim caliphate, so they took 303 rifles and they killed 7 people on their way to the New Year's Day picnic at Menindee Lakes. Look it up, Battle of Silver Hill. Tony Abbott wants to avenge the Battle of Silver Hill. He wants to attack the Muslim caliphate. That's why the Royal Australian Air Force has offered a squadron of Super Hornets and a detachment of Special Air Service commandos to go in as forward air observers and call in the fucking airstrikes. And President Oblaba said, no, you can't do that. We just want you to drop humanitarian Russian ammunition to the Kurds. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Hit me but don't shit me, Tony Budgie Smuggling Wingnut Abbott. I'm not that fucking stupid. I don't believe your bullshit. The rest of YouTube, ciao. It is now sleeting. And blowing. Sorry about the false ending. This time it's for real. Ciao.